Take your seats. All good to go? Okay. Well, I call this meeting to order. It's Public Facilities, Beaufort County, September 20th. And if you would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sarah, I assume we got the FOIAs done correctly?
Yes, sir.
And we have to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any objections? Approved without objection. You got to approve the minutes from July 19th and August the 16th. Is there a motion to approve?
Make the motion.
Okay, second. York?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, approved without objection. Understand we have one person here for citizen comment, so come on forward. And we welcome you. Let us know what your name is and we look forward to hearing from you.
Take the mask off.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Carolyn Smith, and I'm from the All-Joy Preservation Commission, and I'm here to talk tonight about the pathway. I know it's not on your agenda tonight, but I want to give y'all a few things to think about, so when it is on the agenda, you'll keep these things in your mind. And I would like to say that Mark has done a real good job at working with the community to bring this forth. We've had 3 meetings. We've had 3 meetings and 2 surveys. And from the last survey that comes back into the engineers, we had 208 remarks. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with the way that they're going to build this pathway. If it was built right now with the present plans, with everything in place, it would start at the Burnt Church Road, it would go to Thomas Lawton at the beach, it would turn and go to the swimming area and over to the boat ramp, if there was no discussion. And the proposal is 8 feet wide, 8 feet wide, a 5-foot buffer, an 8-foot pathway, and then a buffer. That's wider than 1/2 of a road. And so I sat down and I read all 208 remarks. 66 of those remarks started off that they were in favor of a pathway. 59 of those 66 remarks, although they were in favor of the pathway, wanted to see a change. They either wanted to see it smaller, like a sidewalk. They wanted to see it stop at Shad Avenue, or there was some reasoning, even though they wanted it, there was a reason. 72 of the remarks started, we do not want the pathway. But they still gave an option, if we do have it, we want it to stop at Shad Avenue or take a different route, or the reason why they didn't want it. 47 of the remarks were just very short, like, I would love it, great idea, something like that. 3 people wanted it as a doggy path. And then 10 people wanted it to remain on Shad and Ulmer like it was originally developed in our All-Joy Preservation Plan. The other thing I want you to think about was this was a sales tax vote, and the wording on the sales tax was safety to schools. Well, building an 8-foot pathway to the beach and the boat ramp has nothing to do with the schools. And I've been explained that there's going to be pathways on Burnt Church Road. And to me, for safety to schools, it should come down Shad by the big recreation center, and then it should come to Shad where all the children live that go to school. And my third point is that you need to think about is if it's built in its original form, it will destroy a lot of people's property. The sidewalk will be right at their front door, and I think that that would greatly reduce the value of their homes and your tax base.
Good. Well, I thank you very much for taking the time to come
Okay.
over. I think that,
I want y'all to think about those
Good.
things before we have the real meeting, okay?
yeah, I think
Thank
it's
you.
being teed up for the October meeting of public facilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's been some discussion going on, and there'll be some more. Mark will draw us in. So, but thank you for taking the time to
Okay.
come over.
Thank you.
Okay, you have a great day.
Thank you.
Dave Wilhelm is stepping in for Jared, who's on vacation. And Dave, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, if you could give us an update, and then I think we have one visitor who is joining to give us an update on the infrastructure bill, if you can do that at the same time.
Sure. Actually, I'd like to start with the guest. We have with us Mr. Bernie Arsenault from HDR Engineering. He's their highways and roads director. He joined HDR after 3 years of service in Minnesota Department of Transportation, where he was a deputy commissioner. And this afternoon, Bernie's going to be talking about the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I think Bernie's on the line.
Good.
I am.
Thank you, Bernie, for being with us, and we thought this would be useful with the pending legislation, and understand you're one of the foremost experts in the world.
Well, I don't think I'd go that far, but I have been tracking it. And, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. So, yeah, we are at the cusp of a very big deal with this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, as it's being called. And it is bringing a significant amount of funding to transportation infrastructure. Excuse me. We're looking at a $1.2 trillion bill right now. Now, there's some additional things in that. So, when we look at just the highway side, though, it's a very significant amount of new money that's coming, hopefully over a long term. The Senate, in what's very unusual these days, passed a bipartisan bill that included these things back in August, the early part of August, and it was a 69 to 30 vote. So it's a pretty good bipartisan effort, and that's been the track record of the Senate. Now it is in the House at this point, and we're at a spot right now. I've got an attachment that maybe we can put up in a second here, but there's a lot of things coming together right now. This is very timely for an update like this. We've got the continuing resolution for to prevent a lapse of appropriations government shutdown coming up, and so that's going to have to happen by September 30th. There's also a measure that needs to pass to raise the statutory ceiling on public debt by late October, early November. And then amidst all that is the extension of the Highway Trust Fund, which, if you'll recall, was extended for 1 year last year. And hopefully everything was going to get done by this time. And we're in a good spot for that, but not a perfect spot. And then we all know about that $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill that's also out there. And that is going to impact some of the funding from the House side for sure, because there was an intent that, at least by some, that bill would pass with the infrastructure bill. And there's been a lot of folks that are not necessarily supportive of that. But be that all of those things as it may, we're going to see a lot of things happen coming forward. And I've got a summary document. Again, if they want to put that up, we can kind of walk through some of the funding. Here we go. Sarah's going to put that up for us. I've sent along two documents. One is just a brief summary that we're going to kind of use today. There's also a very extensive document by AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, that goes into great detail if anyone is interested in that. But I'll just go ahead and I've got a document up here, so I'll go ahead and walk through some of these things. So roads and bridges is going to get $110 billion increase. That includes a program about, that's the wrong one, Sarah. The other one is the one we were going to use. So that includes a $27.5 billion bridges plan program to upgrade bridges. Also, there is a broadband access, or you probably all heard about that, but $65 billion for broadband. That's a big amount of money. Transit is getting an increase. Airports are getting an increase. There's drinking water and wastewater, right? And I'm in the, if you want to go down a little bit, I'm going right through that first one there. Yeah. So there's a lot of new money. When it gets to passenger and freight rail, this is a huge increase in passenger and freight rail, and it's been known for some time that President Biden's been a real fan of passenger rail. There's some ports money out there. Transportation safety. I'm a big safety advocate toward zero deaths. Passion for reducing traffic fatalities. So that is very strong in this bill as well. Now, something that I heard that you may be a little interested in is this electric vehicle infrastructure, and the power infrastructure grid. So the electric vehicles piece, that is really $7.5 billion going largely to transit vehicles and school buses. This is not for, it's pretty much focused on that, but it's to help grow those fleets. And then there's also $7.5 billion for charging infrastructure for those electric vehicles. That power infrastructure piece is actually, we've seen a lot of power outages in Texas and California. So this is to enhance the grid, modify the grid to be able to accommodate today's demands, and also build in some resiliency so it can manage through these different events that are happening. And there's the resilience piece. There are a lot of policies associated with this. One of note is that one federal government where they're trying to speed up environmental approvals. And I think that's a very positive thing for us. But all in all, we're going to see a ton of new money. I've been relating this a little bit to if some of you might recall, the ARA program that President Obama put out there. That was 35 to 40 billion extra dollars. At that time, I was at the state of Minnesota, Minnesota Department of Transportation, and that was a huge impact to our budget. And this is significantly more than that. So if we go down to the next chart, this is just more of interest for you, and then I'm going to open it up to questions here. This is the increase in funding for each state. And what you'll find here is it's in the 40 to 50% range. Typically, there's some outside of that. But if you go down to South Carolina, you can see that there's a 40. It's a 40% increase in funds. It's $1.4 billion. And that's real money. And I talked to Jared a bit on this. And one of the suggestions I made, this money is going to be largely distributed through formula. Those of you familiar with transportation funding will recognize that formula is made up of demographics. It's made up of traffic volume and so forth. And that's how it's distributed. And most of this money will be distributed in that manner through formula. But there's a lot of money, and so again, a lot of this is going to be managed or at least handled through the South Carolina DOT. So talked to Jared about going and talking to Leland Coveland, who's their chief engineer, about exactly how some of that's going to happen. So I knew this was to be a real brief update. There's a ton in this. You're going to see different numbers here and there, different people reading it differently. But like, for example, here you see 96 billion additional dollars. You'll see numbers like 110 or 110 or more. There's, with any big bill like this, there's different interpretations, but this will be significant for the transportation industry. With that, I'll just open it up to any questions that any of you might have.
Let me make a comment, then I'll see if anybody has one. But when I was chatting with Jared about the 1.4 billion, my understanding is that's an amount per year for 5 years, so that actually becomes like $7 billion, and our fair share of that would be on the order of $200 million if it was distributed on a population base.
Actually, that's over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
So if you look at the top of that, you'll see that the FAST Act baseline was 2016 to 2020, and then the proposed IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, apportionment for 22 to 26.
The 1.4 is for the total 5 years, is not 1.4 per year.
Correct.
Okay, my mistake. Any quick questions? I know we've kind of run long, but any quick questions? I think it's very useful. I think the takeaway for me is that, as you say, this is going to flow through the normal formulas. We're playing a bit of catch up of getting some of our projects into the state pipeline and the federal pipeline, so it behooves us to move as quickly as we can, and I know Jared's doing that. So I think we're going to be talking a lot about this in the very near future, about making sure we get our fair share of this. So, anybody have a question? If not, we thank you very much, and
very good.
Appreciate your being with us. Dave, back to you.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick items. First of all, in solid waste and recycling, very happy to report the accomplishments of our team in the solid waste and recycling department. The annual South Carolina Litter Conference was held earlier this month. And as in the past, Beaufort County is again recognized for our efforts in controlling litter. Beaufort County won 4 awards, the Local Government Award, Affiliate Award for Keep Beaufort County Beautiful, Community Partnership Award with Port Royal Sound Maritime Center, and KBCB board member Carol Murphy won the Litter Champion Award. And also wanted to mention Artrell Horn, Beaufort County Litter Control Supervisor, was appointed to the State of South Carolina Litter Control Association Board. So I just wanted to recognize and thank all the award recipients, and also wanted to mention and thank Caroline Jordan Colby for all of her efforts in coordinating the Adopted Highway routes.
Okay.
And second item I wanted to report on, EMS Station 31. This is the Red Barn site, as we call it. It's near the new Riverside Traffic Circle in Bluffton. All the work has been completed. I've seen the building during construction, haven't seen it since it's been finished. I heard it's turned out very nicely. Talked to Phil. He's going to start moving his equipment in early October, and there will be a grand opening event scheduled for October 26th. And I think Phil and Don are coordinating that, and we'll make sure everybody gets an invitation for that grand opening event. And that's it for my report.
Okay, that moves us to the agenda items. Dave, are you doing the purchasing items?
Well, the first item is the boat landings.
Okay.
Mark Rosenau on for that one.
Okay. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll be presenting this item for Jared. Excuse me. Beaufort County published a solicitation for consulting services to provide an evaluation and study of issues related to Beaufort County public boat landings. We received 4 firms responded and submitted qualifications. A committee of 4 evaluated the submissions and determined that Creech and Associates was the most qualified. Publicly owned boat landings contribute greatly to the economic impact of tourism and recreation industries and the quality of life of the Beaufort County residents. Beaufort County Engineering desires to make an effort to establish reliable funding sources, create uniform standards, enhance safety, accessibility, security, and environmental compatibility. We currently have $150,000 from H&A tax grant already in place for this project. A second A&H tax grant will be applied for in December for the shortfall of $162,965. Should the grant prove unsuccessful, the remainder contract value will be paid from Facilities Management Account 51130 repairs for buildings. Staff recommends award of RFP 060821 consulting services for public boat landings to Creech and Associates.
Thank you, Mark. I think we've been chatting a little bit about the need to do this, and so it's coming forward to us. Is there some questions for Mark or a motion?
Is there any reason why we wouldn't get the second grant from A-Tax, H-Tax?
It's my understanding, in speaking with Jared, there's a really good chance that that funding will come from A&H, the remainder.
Thank you. I'll make the motion then.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. Any further discussion? And seeing none, are there any objections? Hearing none, that's approved without objection, with the understanding that there's two potential funding sources depending how it plays out as we go through the year. Okay, that takes us, we got three equipment purchases, items 9 through 11. I want to take those as a group unless there's an objection. Who is going to speak to those three vehicle purchases?
I believe Neil is on the line. They're all three pieces of equipment are for public works.
I'm sorry. Yeah, they're all for public works and they're all within budget. Neil?
That's correct. Some of them have been, there's some insurance money that we got back based on damaged piece of equipment. And so between the funding that we got and the insurance money, we were able to accomplish and hopefully purchase them.
So tell us briefly about each of the three, okay?
Okay. So the first one is excavator, Caterpillar. We're looking to get that with long reach stick. That piece of equipment is used daily for everything from digging and excavating, moving dirt, to as well as helping maintain our boat landings and ramps, as it causes us to help lift some of the floating docks and things of that nature. So that's kind of a vital piece of equipment. The second piece, the Tiger Truck Cat, is a mowing apparatus vehicle that's put on a chassis of a pickup truck. We're able to maintain our roadside ditches and all the county right of way for that. And then the third piece is, per contract, we are required to provide a service vehicle for First Vehicle, who is our vehicle maintenance provider. And basically, this vehicle allows us to go to remote locations to fix equipment and or passenger vehicles. Today we had a flat tire, and so they were able to get deployed out in their current vehicle, which is a little bit old, I believe in 2006 and high in mileage, so it's time for replacement. And that's what this Ford F-550 is.
Okay, so let's take the three together. Are there any questions? And is there a motion to approve items 9 through 11, which are three vehicles in budget?
So move.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yes, Gerald.
Yeah. Neil, this is Councilman Dawson. With the purchase of the new Tiger Truck Cab more, that will that give us 2 truck mowers now to maintain the roadside shoulders of grass cutting?
That's correct. There's no at this time there's no purpose to get rid of the other one that we have. The one that we're replacing from this purchase did get destroyed in a fire. So the purchase of this would like you say, give us two.
So would that increase the frequency of our mowing in the rural parts of the county?
Yes, sir. Since right now, currently, we're only down to one. And adding this one as a replacement would definitely increase our frequency.
All right, thank you. I'll make the motion to approve these purchases, Chairman.
Okay, well, Paul beat you to it, but you're a good second.
Okay, good enough.
Any other comments or questions on these vehicle purchases? Not hearing any. Is there any objection? These three stand approved without objection, and we'll move on to council. That takes us to the RFQ for the pool renovations. It's for A&E services. Who's going to speak to that?
I'll take that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Beaufort County, as you know, Beaufort County maintains three public pools. We have one pool in Bluffton at the MC Riley School Complex. The other two are north of the Broad, one at Battery Creek High School, one at Beaufort High School. All three pools are more than 20 years old and nearing the end of their life cycle. A contractor has just recently completed resurfacing pools at Bluffton and Beaufort, and resurfacing Battery Creek Pool will be completed soon. That's sort of a Band-Aid to keep them going a little bit, but all three pools are in fair to poor condition. Staff issued an RFQ to find a qualified engineer architect to evaluate the condition of the pools and the pool structure and make recommendations for the future. Two firms responded. We had an evaluation team select RMF Engineering out of Charleston as the most qualified. RMF is proposing to evaluate the pools and the pool buildings and give us three options. First option is to renovate the existing buildings. The second option is to modify the existing buildings, looking at different types of structures, possibly retractable roofs. And the third option is the cost to build two new pools. So with this information, Chuck and Shannon will be able to make an informed recommendation to the pool board on the future direction of the program. RMS proposed cost, is $75,420. With an allowance for contingencies, the estimated total project cost is $82,500. The study will be funded by the 2019 GO bond that has a balance of $422,850. So it's our staff's recommendation to award the contract for the indoor pool A&E services to RMF Engineering in the amount of $75,420.
Okay. Questions, comments? I do think, assuming this moves forward, Dave highlighted three alternatives. If you see something that's being overlooked, raise your hands, make sure we're not going through a study and then missing a particular thing that ought to be looked at. But any comments or questions? Motion?
Move.
Gerald, okay. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, any objections? This will move on to council without objection. That brings us to the Hilton Head Island Airport. John, are you starting or Hayes? Okay, well, as Hayes is coming up, let me...
We'll tag team.
Okay, give us a little, tag team. Give us a little background where we are. It sounds like you're outgrowing your facility, John. We gave you a little marketing money and you did too much with it.
Outgrowing the facility, I think that'd be the understatement of the day. Well, I'll just tell you some fresh numbers. In 2019, which was our kind of banner year, we don't really have a benchmark year, but we can use that as a benchmark. We put about 233,000 people through the terminal in the year. This year, in the months of May through August, we put almost that same amount, put 205,000 people through the terminal. Same building, a lot more people going through in just a 4-month span. So, as you may know, the Hilton Head Island was again named the #1 island in the continental United States by Travel and Leisure. It's a big deal. It's a great market, so people are coming to that market and they're getting there one way or another. A lot of them are coming through our airport. So I showed you, I think about a month or so ago, the time-lapse video that showed a couple of Saturdays during the summer with all the passengers going in and out of the airport and just what that congestion looks like. So it's let up a little bit after Labor Day, as it tends to do, but we're going to see this same movie again next summer and follow-on summers until we can get the terminal project going. So Hayes is here today to talk about some ideas on how we finance that. In fact, right before I walked into the meeting, I checked my voicemail from my desk phone, and I had a voicemail from one of the big realtors on the island saying, John, I'm in love with the airport, I'm in love with the flights, this is great, but everybody's coming up to me and saying, please give us some hope. When is that terminal going to move forward? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hayes.
And then I also see where United's going to now go year-round and they're seasonal. Tell us about that, too.
Right. United started back in 2019. Strictly seasonal that year. And then last year's kind of a year we won't talk about with the pandemic. And they came back again this year and started in May with their normal 3 hubs. They flew to Washington, Dulles, Chicago, O'Hare, and then Newark Liberty International Airport. And then they also announced the 6 point-to-point cities in the Midwest. And while we don't have all the numbers in yet because the DOT data lags a couple of months, we do know they were successful, and we kept hounding them all summer to get an answer on whether or not they'd be joining us for year-round service. And finally, just very recently, they did let us know that they are staying year-round, at least with the Washington Dulles hub, which is great because from there you can get to pretty much anywhere. But it's fantastic that the United, who's a fairly new partner in this part of the world, this part of the country, this is their first time at our airport, has now committed with really just 2 seasonal seasons under their belt. They're committed to year-round service. So that's a big statement, and they obviously see the market potential and what's happening on Hilton Head Island. So good news.
Hey, he's going to write us a check?
So, give me a second. Can you put up the PowerPoint? So I've been given the question of, Hayes, how do we fund this? And I'm looking at something that gives us $405 million in revenue. And the current airport is definitely inadequate. It needs to be redone, and we need to keep this project moving forward. Is this the final solution that I'm giving you tonight? Probably not. It's probably going to be a modification. But if you...
Yeah.
Got it? I'm sure I'll rather look at the presentation than me anyway.
Presentation, I hope it's not going to take that long to go through.
It will not. It'll be short. We already have some established funding, and that's good news. What John is proposing and what we have right now is we're looking at 4 gates with 3 jet bridges and 1 walkout. The total cost that they're estimating right now is about $52 million. Currently, we got $20 million that we can get in FAA grants. We can get $1 million from the SCAC, and we can get $1 million from the actual airport. So we have $22 million there. We got another $30 million question. I'm letting the ambulance go by. So there are any number of potential sources. There are additional federal grants out there that we're hoping to get. There are also additional state grants that we're hoping to get. But our immediate need is now, and we're really looking. So I really kind of had to think outside the box. And when I really thought about it, I said, what does this airport do? This airport is a conduit, a tourist conduit to bring people down from major hubs around America to one of the greatest destinations in the world, in my opinion. And thinking of that same hat, I had an epiphany one night, and I said, I wonder if this could qualify under hospitality tax. So I talked to our bond counsel, and she said, Hayes, I think that this is very well within the guidelines of what this funding is for. So then I looked at what was our annual revenue collected from accommodation and hospitality tax. And so you have for the past 4 years an approximate amount. It's not exact, obviously, but in the total revenue, you're getting up to about 4.23 million. Next slide. So I came up with scenarios for the revenue bond. And so I had scenario one. What if we had 20 million? What if we had 30 million? What if we had 34 million? And although it would take a cut into the hospitality tax fund, it's really what the hospitality fund was supposed to do. But if in scenario one, which is $20 million, which if I was to recommend right now, that would be probably what I would recommend. We still have about $1 million to give out to various agencies, or the wards through Shannon Milroy. And as you go up to 30 million and then 34, it gets less and less. The $20 million scenario I think would be best because this airport is on Hilton Head. And I really think the town of Hilton Head should help fund some of this. And my suggestion would be that we'll put up 20, if you put up 10, that gets us our 30. But I also want to have the flexibility to say, I know it's a political thing, but I want to have the flexibility to have a not to exceed 30. So that's where I am with that. Next slide. We have the pros and cons. One of the pros, the revenues fit within the hospitality guidelines. Awesome. This is a zero millage increase for any of your taxpayers, which everybody likes. I personally, as a taxpayer, like to hear that. It doesn't affect our general obligation bond capacity, which all these, all the facilities plans that we're looking at, we're going to need a lot of GO money generated. Currently, our threshold is approximately, I think we have 85 to 80, $90 million left that we can borrow. So it doesn't touch that. It leaves that completely alone. And then, as I said, this airport acts as a conduit to the major hubs. The cons, obviously, you're going to have to pay interest on this, and probably around $46 million. And then the local agencies will be getting less, but we'll be bringing more revenue, I believe, into Hilton Head and to the county of Beaufort as a whole. The next slide is just kind of some tourist destinations that we have around the area. And so my recommendation would be for us to start pursuing this, to keep this moving forward, to keep this project moving forward. I'd personally like to see the 20 million and have the town of Hilton Head put in the other 10, but I'd like to have the flexibility of the not to exceed 30. And that's really all I have for a presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
John, why don't you give us an update on where you are in the design and your approvals from the town and so on the design?
Sure, thank you. It's a perfect question to ask because just last Tuesday, the project received final DRB approval from the town of Hilton Head. So that's Design Review Board. And I've been taking projects to Design Review Board for the better part of 2 decades now. And it took 16 months to get through and get it approved, so it's not a quick process. But that's the board that reviews the architectural design, the aesthetics, the landscape design, the site layout, that sort of thing. And it was a long collaborative process that began, like I said, 16 months ago and just ended last week with the final approval. And we got comments like, this is a great project, a project we're proud to have on the island, and a project that reflects very well the character of the island. And doing this for about 20 years now, you rarely get comments like that. And it only happens when you work together very closely with that review board. So that was great. Certainly a huge testimony to, or testament to what that terminal looks like and really what it's going to do for the folks. So the design is complete. and we'll be ready. I think there's just one more kind of development permit through the town of Hilton Head Island that we'll have to receive as well, but the DRB was a step towards that process. So that's really the only permit we need to finish up in order to begin construction on that and be ready to bid. So I think best case scenario, what we're looking at is, kind of a late fall bid date is what we'd hope for.
Okay. So as we get into discussion, I think what's before us is going down a path in parallel, which is having some assurity that we can fund it so that John can get on with the bidding process. And at the same time, we're tidying up and massaging and figuring out what we want the funding piece to look like. And that comes back to what Hayes has put on the table for discussion. So let me open it up for comments and discussion at this point.
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Paul. I'm sorry, Brian.
Thank you. Hayes, I have a question for you. Where did you come up with that split of 2030 for county to Hilton Head? Where did that come from?
What?
Group discussion.
I'd like to say I came up with it on my own, but yeah, it was group discussions with several meetings on staff. What? What, sir?
Who was in that group?
Mainly, I believe it was county administration. We're just trying to come up with a feasible solution.
Well, I just was curious because the town of Hilton Head's income from A-tax is, my memory serves me, I think that it's twice as much as Beaufort County's. And since the airport on Hilton Head primarily serves that market, it would seem fair that they have a bigger stake in the game than Beaufort County. I think the A-tax collected by Beaufort County, only 25% of it was collected, maybe it's only 50% of it was collected south of the Broad River. Most of the businesses that pay A-tax and H-tax are located within the municipalities. And so it seems fair that quite frankly, the bigger split, the beneficiaries of those H-tax or the people who generate that A-tax would be, and H-tax would be the ones who are paying that. And most of that south of the Broad River is in the municipalities. And so I would ask that staff reconcile for us, tell us exactly where H-tax and A-tax are generated in the most recent, say, 18 months, and tell us how much money Hilton Head generates from H-tax and A-tax and the town of Bluffton, et cetera. And then how much is in the unincorporated areas south of the Broad River is generated in the last 18 months for A-tax and A-tax.
Councilman Flewelling, I can tell you right now, I had Edra Stevens before we had this meeting come up with and she does it as not on our fiscal year, but did it as 12/31. And we're talking about two separate pots of money, and that's the local A-tax and the local hospitality tax. And I had her run the numbers, and she did them by property codes and where they're located. And so for A-tax, we get you're almost right on the money. Is 27.78% was from south of the Broad. That would be unincorporated parts of all of Daufusky's unincorporated, obviously, but Bluffton, unincorporated parts of Bluffton, and unincorporated parts of Hilton Head. Now, for the hospitality, that's a whole different animal. So the unincorporated parts of Bluffton, Hilton Head, and Daufusky, of the $2.1 million that she got in that 12 months, 75% of that, 75.45% of that was from Daufusky, unincorporated Bluffton, unincorporated Hilton Head. So I had done that research. I do not have the exact numbers on the town of Hilton Head or Bluffton, but I can get them for the next finance committee or council meeting if you would like.
You're saying the A-tax is heavily skewed to the northern part of the county and the unincorporated, and the H-tax is just the opposite. It's more skewed to the southern part of the unincorporated.
Correct, and that's and when I'm saying we're going to use A and H tax, what I need to make this point of clarification. We get better interest and we get better bond rating if we pledge both of them. But whatever we don't use from the H tax, it looks like we could pay all of the debt service just out of A tax. But anything left over is amounts that we can give out to the agencies.
You said pay it out of H tax, right?
Right, out of the H tax, not the accommodations.
Okay.
So, I guess my thrust is that, if Beaufort County is committing such a large percentage of its A tax and H tax, in other words, every dollar other than $1 million that we would like to give to various agencies, then I would ask that the town of Hilton Head and the town of Bluffton do exactly the same thing, other than, say, a percentage amount. If Beaufort County gets X number of dollars and we're only saving $1 million, and everything else, I would ask that the town of Hilton Head and the town of Bluffton do exactly the same thing. And then that way, instead of having to finance this for 10 years or 15 years or whatever is contemplated, that we could do it in, say, 3 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments? I can't see anybody on the screen, so speak up if you want to speak into
If I might, Mr. Chairman, real quick.
Yes.
Up over here. Councilmember Fluellen, you're exactly right. We're presenting these percentages to you today just to open the discussion. We've discussed all sorts of scenarios with regards to how to fund this and do the payback and all of that. So we certainly are open to council's suggestions and recommendations on how we proceed on this and any other revenue items that may exist. There's other things that we could potentially use, but in order to get the bond, we have to pledge a definitive source to pay that back. But we also have, car rental revenues, parking revenues, all sorts of things that we could also use to help do this. But we're just starting the discussion. So it's very good recommendation by you. So thank you.
Others? Chris?
Thank you. We've got two questions. I want to make sure that I'm just understanding this correctly. So, to Brian's point, we're pledging the A tax, which is largely driven by the northern part of the county, but we're going to pay for it with H tax, which is largely driven from the southern part of the county. Is that correct?
Councilman, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. The other question that I had, and I'm not entirely sure who's best to answer this, but you showed that map of where tourism is driven from the airport. And I noticed that the Fusky was not colored there. So do we have any sort of sense of how much tourism is driven from the airport to the Fusky, or it's just too hard to tell?
Not much.
I think it'd be hard to tell. I mean, if I was, either you're on vacation on a Fusky or Hilton Head, but there are people on Hilton Head that might do a day trip and rent a golf cart and tour Defusky. It'd be really hard to say. I could tell you that Defusky had, their percentages are about the same for H and A. A-tax, they're about 2.6% and of the total, and H, they're about 3.2% of the total.
I appreciate that. I'll say I think this was a really good presentation. I think you guys did a really good job. I think it's directionally correct, and I support this wholeheartedly. I think it's a really clever use of funds that are available, and just really well done.
Thank you, Councilman. I would like to brag and say that I did the PowerPoint presentation, but if I did, I would be lying to you. I really would like to give a salute to Brittany Fields, who helped me out. She did just a tremendous job with this PowerPoint, I thought.
Mark, did I see your hand up?
No.
Anybody else? I guess my thought as a possible path forward, recognizing that we probably need to have quite a bit of discussion about the points that have been raised, particularly the ones that Brian, but given the fact that we want to get on with positioning ourselves to proceed to the bidding process would be to take this forward by title only to council at the next council meeting, knowing that we're going to have a lot of in-depth discussions in order to narrow this down and refine it to where everybody is happy with it. Anybody see that differently or want to do it a different way?
Yeah, I do, Stu. And until we have conceptual agreement from the people we know of as our partners in this matter, then I don't think we should move forward at all. I mean, I think we'll have plenty of time once we know they're willing to sit at the table and talk to us about what fair shares are. Once we know they're willing to sit down and have that conversation, maybe we can proceed. But right now, I can't be in a position to vote for this.
Okay, other thoughts? Okay, so we have two choices. One would be to perhaps move it forward by title only. The other is that we go further on the negotiations and come back through public facilities. Is there a motion either way of what people would prefer?
Yeah,
Make a motion, we table this discussion until we have some clear direction from our partners where they think they would like to go with this.
I'll second.
Okay. I would assume that you mean
If we're going to table this, that means we're just going to take this up later on in this meeting. It would be a postponement of this till we get further information.
That's the way I would like to phrase it, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would, if I would just recommend that you all instruct staff that you agree with the potential use of the funding source in some combination.
I think that's inherent in the motion, sir, that we're approving the concept of using HTAX and ATAX money for this construction of the airport on Hilton Head, and move forward from there. So once we get the conversation going with our partners, have reading by title only, and then once we develop a firm commitment from them that has received support of their respective councils, then move the language forward to get this done.
Okay, so what did you say about first reading by title only?
Well, once we have a commitment from the administrations to consider it, to actually have the dialogue, then we'll go ahead and read by title only.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to postpone until we come back with a more definitive proposal to flesh out the financing, but a conceptual understanding that this is a good source to go for.
Exactly, sir. Yes.
Okay. Is there any further comments on that? Paul?
Yeah, just a thought. I don't know how many outstanding issues we have with the different municipalities right now. Thinking about Hilton Head, I know we have the school impact fee is outstanding. There may be others, but I just wonder when we have these discussions, if we shouldn't kind of get an update on these other items that are outstanding, because they're all important. Yes. They're all important.
Okay. Is there any objection to the proposed postponement until we have more definitive? And I'm assuming if we get it together sooner than our October PFC meeting, we may call a special meeting to come back or tuck it into one of the other meetings. Okay. Is there any objection to the postponement proposal? Seeing none, it's approved without objection. Next item is the Wimby Creek Fishing Pier. It's an assessment of its condition. Who is doing that?
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Atherton will be presenting this one.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rodman and committee members. And I'm going to report out on the Wimby Creek Fishing Pier. I'll be going over the condition assessment, alternatives for rehab and repair and or demolition, and then a request to apply for a HTAX grant to proceed with engineering very similar to what we did on the Broad River fishing pier. So if you could put up the PowerPoint presentation.
Did you understand what she said?
Right here? She's waiting for the PowerPoint to come up, and similar to what we did at Broad Creek, to look at the assessment options, I think. Paul was just asking why it's coming up. My understanding is that we're proposing to go into an assessment that may have several different alternatives.
That is correct. Here's the presentation. A little background on Wimby Creek Fishing Pier. It's located at the end of Wimby Landing Road. It's just over 300 foot long. It was a former railroad trestle, which we repurposed with a concrete deck and railings. In 2018 and 19, we hired McSweeney Engineering to conduct routine inspections. Those inspections late in 2019 showed severe deterioration and fire damage to key load-bearing elements. As a safety precaution, a portion of that fishing pier was fenced off to restrict public access. After the 2019 evaluation and inspection, we hired McSweeney Engineers to evaluate some repair rehab alternates, give us a cost on potential demolition, and opinion of probable costs on each one of the scenarios for 6 alternatives. Overall, in 2019, which is what prompted having them put together the alternatives, was that the overall rating of the fishing pier was from fair to serious. The deck, the concrete deck that we had repurposed on top of the railroad bed was in fair condition, cracking of the concrete surfaces. The superstructure was in poor condition due to some displacement of bearing pads, and the substructure was poor to serious. Again, fire damage at the last 2 spans and significant deterioration of the timber structural elements. Their conclusion and summary at the end of 2019 is that the structure is near the end of its service life due to the advanced deterioration of the key load-bearing elements. So they put together some alternatives, A through F, for us. I will go through each real quickly, but you can see that the third column in is the range of costs. And this is just an opinion of cost. And again, this was done in 2020, so the costs are very variable at this point. But you can see the range that they gave us. The important thing also to note in these alternatives is a service life. That alternates F through E only have a service life of 25 years. And then we can talk about the potential of a new pier, which would have a service life of 50 years. But moving through the alternates, alternate A is to do nothing. And at this point, with the evaluation that it's reached its near-term service life, alternate A really is not an alternate due to significant safety liabilities in the near future. Alternate B, which is the most expensive one, and again, a service life of 25 years, is full rehabilitation. And this would include jacketing the piles, repairing all the bearing plates, rebuilding pile caps, and all new hardware. So that's a complete rehab, including the 2 spans at the end. Alternates C through E, partial rehab with an aluminum deck, and partial rehab with a timber deck, are all basically related. There would be a rehab of the entire structure except for the last 2 spans, which are the fire damage spans. Those would be demolished and removed from the area. Obviously, alternate C would be a concrete deck rehab. Alternate D would be they would remove the concrete deck and put an aluminum deck in, and alternate E would be a timber deck. All very similar, ranging anywhere from $1 million to 1.3 million. Again, the important point is a service life of only 25 years. To completely demo and remove the structure, the probable cost is somewhere between $650,000 to $800,000. If this area warrants a new fishing pier, they did give us an option for a new timber pier between $350,000 and $400,000, and again a service life of 50 years. I might add, and it's not on the PowerPoint, but I reviewed some of the data in the PowerPoint with Neil Desai and Mark Rosenau, and they came up with some great points and some great observations. This area in particular, we don't know what the traffic is there as far as fishing, but it's not a great fishing location for two reasons, at least, that they brought up. Number one, there's a significant current in this area. And number two, fishing at its best is closer to the water. Now, again, Broad River Fishing Pier, we're way up. But again, it's tough. It's very tough to fish from that height of the water. So they said, if a fishing pier needs to go back in this location, in lieu of a new timber pier in the location of the existing one, why not a ground out float, which would be significantly less, maybe a third to a quarter of the cost to put a ground out float in, and it can go out 50 foot, 75 foot, 100 foot. But there's an option that might be worthwhile looking at. So tonight, the reason for the presentation was to bring forth a request to, number one, to have a discussion of what alternates you would prefer, and secondly, to get a recommendation to proceed with hiring an engineer to take a look at some of the alternatives. If the selection is that we need to demolish the structure, and so we could get some engineering costs on that, put up a new pier, or look at some additional alternatives. And our plan was to, if approved, to go back for an HTAX grant application to hire an engineer, which is exactly what we're doing on the Broad River Fishing Pier right now.
Okay, open it up for questions and comments.
If I might, Stu.
Yes, Gerald.
Let me ask the question. When you talk about if we decide to go with a new pier, ground out float, and I don't know, can you specify what a ground out float looks like, what it is? And
so a ground out float would be something similar to the boat landing that is there. There's a concrete structure that's on the bank, and it goes out into the water a short distance, and then we would have a float like the boat landing that is there right now.
All right, would that come with railings, some type of railings to give some safety to the citizens fishing from that float, that they don't just actually slip and fall off the float into the water?
It certainly could be a design consideration. Those are the kind of things that we would like to look at for fishing.
Okay, all right. I would say that this fishing pier serves that local community well, and it also attracts some visitors from the Collington part of the community also. But the original pier is in severe need of repairs, and to the extent that if we were going to do any repairs to the existing structure, then I would suggest that we just do an all-out full repair of the existing structure. But given the scenario that you gave us with the new pier, and the ground out float and a 50-year lifespan, that sounds more appealing to me than actually trying to invest in the existing structure that's there. If we tore down the existing structure, demolish it and move it out, what time frame are we looking at of getting the new structure, the floating ground out float in and up and running for an application?
Considering applying for the AH tax, actually getting the grant, hiring the engineer, going through the scenarios, the permitting process, which is typically extremely long, I would say a year and a half or so before the demolition could be completed and a new ground out dock be put in, and that would probably be the minimum.
Okay.
Eric, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay, others? While you're thinking, did I understand correctly, if I added the numbers up on that chart, that the demolition and the rebuilding of it and building of a timber pier would be about 1.2 million, which was on a similar order to some of the others, but it has twice the useful life?
That's correct. The statistics are, and again, they went through all the scenarios so that we could see how important it is to look at them all. But yes, you are looking at that correct.
And say again, what you want? Some additional engineering that would do what that the current engineering hasn't done?
So engineering really hasn't been done yet. They did inspections and they wrote a condition assessment for us. What this would do is get an engineer on board. That engineer could work with, if the decision is to demolish and build something new, even with demolishing this structure, some engineering has to take place. So the engineer would develop the drawings and write the specifications for doing the demolition. And then if we wanted to proceed with adding a ground out float, then they could also do the drawings for that.
So are we headed toward potentially saying that the demolition and the new timber pier with the longer useful life would be the more logical thing, and that we would start down that engineering path?
If the decision going forward is that demolition of the structure is a given, if that's the decision of the committee, is that we need to demolish this structure, it makes sense, even if we're going to build something new, to get a longer service life for the same amount or less. Yeah. So then, yes, we would hire the engineer. They would prepare the demolition drawings and specifications, and then we would work with them on alternatives for putting something back in.
So I guess maybe the first question for us as a committee, and unless staff wants to weigh in on it, it would appear from the numbers that going down the demolition and new pier would be the most cost-effective way to go, unless I'm missing something. Eric?
I mean, you're going to spend a little more money doing the demolition and rebuilding and building a new pier, but you're getting the service life that's twice as long. So, so it'd be over the lifespan, it would be a lot cheaper.
So I guess the question for us is, go ahead, York.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does anybody kind of disagree with going down that path of, at least for the time being, the demolition, new pier, getting an engineer to start to look at it?
Well, let me say something about the engineer piece, and I haven't talked about this with staff. Staff's done an excellent job with this, so I don't want anything that I'm going to say today to look like I'm trying to contradict the staff, but you all voted earlier to commission a boat ramp study, things like that. I would recommend, since it's going to be a year or so before we can do anything with this anyway, that we not spend any engineering money on this because there might be other engineering services that we need once the boat ramp and that other study is done. And we could probably get some cost savings if we need to have engineering services on other items once that study is complete. To do that whole evaluation as one piece will probably save money if we can wait a few months.
Yeah, good catch.
To get that done. So I'm not a big fan. It seems like we're in a cycle of hire engineers, and this next year, I'm gonna try to break us away from that and be a little more efficient, make sure we're being as effective as possible with these types of things.
York?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand exactly what you just said, and I don't have a problem with what you just said as far as delaying. And I think staff is asking what direction we want to go in. I agree with Mr. Dawson and you, Mr. Rodman, that's to me, the better way to go, the best way to go at this time. At the same time, by demolishing, not only are we demolishing a trestle that's not ideal for fishing, but we are designing a fishing pier that's ideal for that site. So I agree with the path moving forward with the new trestle, et cetera, going forward with a fishing pier. But when we do it, I don't have a problem delaying it.
Yeah. Any sense of order of magnitude of what the engineering cost would be that's being proposed?
Yeah, typically anywhere between 12 and 18% of the cost of construction. Engineering and permitting.
It'd be about 150,000 counting the demolition.
Yes.
I'm kind of indifferent. Whichever way staff wanted to go would be okay with me. It wouldn't bother me to get on with it. It wouldn't bother me to include another project. I think we ought to leave it in your hands for recommendation. Anybody disagree with kind of the path we're on? Let staff decide.
Yeah, we can discuss it as a staff and decide what makes the most sense. I mean, we've got a little bit of pressure on this one because we've got to move on this one, or we need to move to deal with the public sentiment that was expressed several weeks ago to provide some ADA accessibility. I think this is the pier where we had the Facebook postings about providing accessibility for.
So there's no disagreement. Let's leave it in your hands with kind of a sense that it probably makes sense to move toward a new pier, but come back to us when you want some money.
Yeah, just real quickly, I'd point out that I think it's probably good to remove this from the other study that's being done and proceed on this one separately.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
I kind of think Brian's right on that. Is anybody disagree with that? Just step out? Okay. Well,
So we save a little bit of money on the other survey.
so you would think about it with staff, but we'd welcome you coming back and saying we want to approve some money to get on with it.
I'll leave it like this. We'll do it in the manner where it saves the county the most amount of money and keeps projects moving in an effective and efficient manner.
Okay. That okay with you, Brian?
Well, I had two other considerations that you need to think about is public safety and ADA compliance.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
Throwing that out there.
Yeah, I got it.
Thanks.
Very good point.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay, next item, and we'll try to finish up quickly. I could probably give you an update on the 170 improvements. This is the section between 278 and 462, and not to go into too much detail, you may remember there's been studies that have been done. There was a near-term study that was done. It was identified about a $3 million total cost. Had 4 sub-projects. The light at 462 has been done. That leaves 3. We agreed to get on with the engineering, and we approved $1.5 million toward the construction. We believe that Jasper's in the process of approving about $1 million, which should fund it. And we're asking Hardyville, who says they would participate but haven't agreed on an amount yet. So I think that's moving forward. I think the only slight issue that came up was that if you can think about if you were going westbound on 278 and got off and you were on the ramp that butts into 170, I think DOT is looking for 2 left turns, and I think most of us realize you need 2 right turns. So from my perspective, as long as the engineers sort it out, but if whether we have 2 lefts and 2 rights or 1 of each with 1 lane that goes both ways, as long as we satisfy both of those, I think we're in good shape. And I think the other piece that's done for us, I think it's going to open up an awful lot of discussion with Jasper. We know there's an awful lot of development is going along there. Every time you go by, there's a new a new lot that's being worked on, and it behooves both ourselves and Jasper to work together, and I think this is a first step. Any comments or questions on that one? Seeing none, then there's something called the 170 access plan in the north. Okay.
I believe Juliana Smith is there to give an in-person presentation.
Good evening, committee members. I am here just to introduce you all to a joint planning effort that's taking place between the city of Beaufort and the county for the SC 170 corridor from Paris Island Gateway to Castle Rock Road. The last time a planning effort was done for access management on this portion of the corridor was in 2002, so 20 years ago, essentially, at this point. And since then, some conditions have changed. We have some new issues on the corridor that didn't exist at the original time of that plan. A really good example of that is the Bridges Preparatory School's issues with ingress and egress at their access onto the corridor. I believe they've had police officers out there helping them manage traffic, trying to get students to and from school. We also have some big commercial development coming down the pipeline on that part of the corridor closer to the Paris Island Gateway, right across from the Walmart and TJ Maxx shopping centers. And so with all of this development coming down the pipeline and soon to be online, thought it was an opportune time to take a look at that access management plan and update it so that we're fresh and we're working with the new conditions on the ground. And so Andrews Engineering was procured under a small A&E to conduct the update. The city and the county are splitting the cost 50-50, so we wanted to let you all know about this because next month there will be an IGA codifying that cost share agreement coming before you for consideration. And in the next several months, it's hoped that the plan will come before you for your consideration. So there's no action tonight on this. We just wanted to let you all know about what's going on and what to expect in the next few months.
Okay, great. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lastly, we're looking for some kind of a drainage easement for a couple of parcels.
Yes, Neil Desai can give some detail on this. Neil, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here. So, Councilman, basically back in the 90s, the Trask family granted an easement. This easement is located in the town of Port Royal. Due to some research with our right-of-way manager, we noticed that the location of the physical location of the ditch is actually not where the reported easement is. The action presented before you was basically administratively putting the actual recorded easement on the actual ditch physically where it is. This system is kind of a drainage system that drains all of kind of 170 foot of the Broad River Bridge, and it's kind of this one is adjacent to the Albert Point apartment homes there on 170. Aberley, sorry.
Okay. Any questions on this?
Need a motion?
Motion?
So moved.
A second.
Ordinance a second. Any objection? Seeing no objection, this is approved as permitted. Let me just make one or two closing comments, if I might. We're going to have our retreat, as we talked about, in November, and I think we as a committee need to be thinking about what our objectives might be for next year. And so I imagine we'll talk about that at our October meeting. In terms of the 6 that we have on our table right now, one is the ferry. It's been going a little bit slower, but there are 3 possibilities. That one's discussions with Savannah, one's discussion with a ferry company, and one is purchase of another location, so we'll see how that unfolds. We talked about the airport. On the solid waste, some good progress with the enterprise zone, but at the same time, the next kind of big step is what they call a sustainability campus, where we could gain better control over the flow of the waste, which provides options to do a lot of things. I think staff is getting relatively close on that. And there's a couple of sites that are in play which we can't talk about, so we may end up having a discussion just from a generic site standpoint, but I think that's coming along. There are three major bunches of capital. One is capital itself, one is the transport stuff, which we have talked quite a bit about, and the other is the facilities piece. And on the facilities piece, I've asked York if he would kind of spearhead the discussion on that, potentially as early as October on that. And I think the path forward on that, having received the plan and discussed it in detail, is to somewhat accept it so it's there as a list of things for the future, because a lot of good work went into that. Although as we do a final wrap-up on it, there may be a couple things that we want the consultants to do different if we wanted to have a few more things for history, since this has all been put together. I think any part of all three of these plans has a funding component to it, and Whitney's been kind enough to say that she'll help us with that, and I've spoken with Mark. It kind of branches both of our committees, but in a perfect world, we come out of this year with financial plans for those three particular categories. In talking to people, it seems like kind of what makes sense to most is that we have some kind of a 3-year rolling short-term plan, so that each year we're saying, okay, these are the ones that are on our horizon. What is the stuff that we really want to do in the short term? You've probably been following the paper. There's been a lot going on at Hilton Head with 278 and the corridor project. They've acknowledged that as they go to DOT, we've got to make sure we're together. So I anticipate there'll be some discussions coming up with them in the near process. And lastly, as I've talked to Jared, and we think about where we are in terms of investing, it's clear that construction costs are going up faster than borrowing rates at this point in time. We also know, when you're thinking back on the infrastructure discussion, that there's a lot of stuff that we may qualify for, but to some extent we've got to get in the federal and state pipelines. And there may be places that we want to invest a little bit of money on things that we need to do anyway in order to position ourselves to get some large dollars. So I think as time goes forward, we'll be having some discussion sooner rather than later about whether or not which projects we want to get on with. And some of those may be very timely just in terms of investing a little bit to get a lot. So, Eric, you got something else to say and let us know?
Mr. Chairman, before he does that, can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Yes. You asked me to consider chairing the Public Facility Committee moving forward, and at that workshop, you were not there at the workshop, and Chairman Passman said that he was going to direct the executive committee to chair that. So I think you.
Well, I actually had a subsequent conversation with him, unless he corrects me on the line, but the next step was to come back to public facilities for a discussion, and whatever steps we want to take.
Okay, we'll talk about it. I just want to make sure that, yeah.
Hopefully I understood him correctly. I tried to.
Okay, thank you.
But you can't get out of it that easily. Eric?
So a couple things that we're working on in addition to that, just so council members that may be interested in attending these, didn't know if you were going to mention it or not, but we have a community meeting coming up at Buckwalter on October 14th to discuss the Bluffton 5B project with council member Cunningham. In addition to that, we're working on a workshop in October for council it'll be a lengthy workshop, be broken into 2 parts. We will discuss and give you all the overview of the results of the Regional Housing Trust Fund study. I will be doing that portion of it. And we will also have the folks from Columbia, Mr. Rainwater and his office, who's been working with our GIS department on local redistricting. So we'll keep you all posted on when we get those scheduled.
I'm glad you reminded me of the 5B. Just a closing comment on that. For the history of those who may not know it, back in the 2006 referendum, one of the items that was on there was creating a section of the Bluffton Parkway, which is known as 5B, which kind of run from Buck Island, I think, over to whatever the name of the road is there, the perpendicular road. We ran out of money, so we never actually did that section. Several years later, it was Buckwalder what I was thinking about. A couple years later, the town of Bluffton asked us to do a realignment of a portion of that original one, and they paid for it. So we actually did the realignment, if you will, the preliminary engineering of what it would look like. Enough time has passed so that anything that we do on 5B would have to be re-permitted. And I think the path forward, if we were to do anything there, probably flows out of LATS and the Low Council of Governments as they prioritize what are the arterial roads that we need. So I think the takeaway from that is that there's nothing actually happening on 5B at this point in time. We'd wait and see what the planning authorities say. Now, having said that, right in the vicinity of where, on Buckwalder, where Bluffton Parkway is, that heads over to the west toward 170, there's some work that needs doing in the immediate vicinity of that. We have the money approved out of impact fees, we ended up taking the engineering forward enough so that they came up with a couple potential alternatives. Keep in mind, these are all just very close to that intersection. Jared did a great presentation to the town of Bluffton last week on that. Got some good input, doing a little more analysis. But that piece is in discussion, but that's totally different than the whole 5B, which is where there's some angst in the community. So anyway, thank you for reminding me of that, Eric. I think we're
ready to adjourn. I agree. Can the 5D be virtual?
We can set it up and do it virtually as well as in person.
We stand adjourned.